We all love fables. We love folklore. In fact, we've got a reanimated live version of a very famous Chinese fable out there right now that's become a big hit. I know this movie so well because my wife and I raised two spirited daughters that love this movie. And in 2012 and 13, I spent a lot of time in China, and I taught, and I wrote some films, and we actually started working on the live-action Mulan, way back then, talking about concept and idea. But you know, in history, what if we had a real-life Mulan right here in the United States? The year was 1760, and born to a family of 7 was a young girl named Deborah Sampson. Now, Deborah Sampson was spiritually from the original Plymouth colony that landed in 1620. In fact, William Bradford, the first governor of the Pilgrims, was her direct descendant. But at the age of 8 years old, Deborah Sampson and all her brothers and sisters were orphaned. Her father had left to seek virtue other places. Presumably, he had been lost at sea. Her mother was overwhelmed and had to give the children up as orphans. But soon, the people that they were given out to, they had passed away. And by the age of 10, Deborah Sampson was an indentured servant. That's basically one small step above slavery. And for the next 10 years, Deborah Sampson would be working, scrubbing, working on the farm, doing manual labor. One of the graces of God with Deborah Sampson is she was taken in by a Christian elder and their 10 children. And during that decade of time, she learned all kinds of skills that she would have never, ever learned in life. This orphan child, this abandoned child, that seemingly had no hope or future, now found herself wrapped in a Christian community. She actually learned how to read or write, and by the time she was 18 years of old, and her indenturement there with that family, the Thomas family, by the time it was over, she was able to teach school. Now, this was 1781, and we were in the height of the Revolutionary War. In fact, by this time, all the great resources on the American side were being critically depleted. Deborah Sampson said to herself, I need to contribute. I need to get involved. Yes, a young woman that had some of the hardest hardships in life wanted to figure out a way to get into the fight. Because she had been raised sewing, she sewed a suit of clothing, a man's clothing, and she enlisted in the Continental Army. Now, what was so risky about this is that women that were caught serving in combat in the Army were dishonorably discharged, and many of them were hung, or the penalty of this was death. But Deborah Sampson saw the great need, saw the great shortage, and at the age of 21, she went down to the recruiting office, cut her hair, dressed as a man, and registered as Robert Shirtliff. Robert was her elder brother who had passed away from the great conflict. And so we have the Mulan story sort of all written again. Now, Deborah Sampson was almost 5 feet 8 inches tall, very tall for a woman. And yet, when she was recruited, she had to say that she was 16 years old because she had no facial hair. Because she was so tall and she was so agile and she had so many skills, she was put into the light infantry. And today we would call that the Army Rangers or the Navy SEALs. Actually, George Washington sent her on her first assignment with a group of other men into Manhattan to spy out the land and the territory. In the Battle of Yorktown, she was requested to dig trenches, and during that time, while she was digging trenches with the other men, cannonballs were flying over the head. I have a cannonball here from that period of time, and she saw many of her fellow soldiers die in the field of battle. Thank you. She was so impressive in her faith and her action that it reached all the way to General Patterson and George Washington. She was assigned to go into Philadelphia and also scout and to lead a brigade. And during this time, Deborah Sampson, on her exploits, had unrooted many of the sort of Tory sympathetic parties within the United States. She captured many of the double British agents. In fact, in one farmhouse alone, interesting that we're talking about this today, she released a whole provision of salt to help sustain the army during that time. But it was during this battle at Tarrington on her way to Philadelphia that she got into fierce combat. She was shot twice in the thigh, and then she was bayoneted across her forehead. She knew that any moment that if a doctor found out that she was a woman, she would be summarily arrested and discharged and face a great and grave penalty. She got the head bandage, the head wound fixed, but she hid the shots into her leg. She crawled off after being bandaged up, and she went into the woods and literally did surgery on herself and was able to remove one musket ball, but one musket ball remained in her leg for the entire length of her service in the army. Deborah Sampson led that group into Philadelphia, but camp fever struck the army, and soon Deborah was stricken with the camp fever just like many of the other soldiers, and she passed out. She was carried to a military hospital. Dr. Binney attended to her, and she was pronounced dead on that table and was piled with the other corpses until she made a meek little sound. He took her under his care and then soon found out that she was a woman. He had compassion on her and took her to his home, and for 7 months, he nursed her back to health, a Christian doctor. But on the end of that stay, he wrote General Patterson a letter, and basically saying, Deborah, the heroic acts and her courageousness and inspiration, that she should be awarded and not defamed. And she was given an honorable discharge in the army. And she was the first woman, as Patrick Henry would stand and thunder before Congress. Patrick Henry, the hero of the Revolution, and Paul Revere both wrote letters to Congress saying, if there is anyone who ever deserves to receive care, commendation, and heroic embellishment, it's Deborah Sampson. And Deborah Sampson becomes the first woman ever to receive a military pension. We have up there the statue outside her home in Massachusetts as she stands there with a powder horn and a musket. She got married after the Revolution and had 3 children. And Paul Revere got her to speak all over the country. She became the first national speaker across the United States and encouraged many. It took 200 years for women to equal the level in the United States Army that Deborah Sampson achieved in the Continental Army in 1781. Deborah Sampson gave what she had. What did she have in her hand? What did she come from little experience? She gave it away. She became a great hero and a great inspiration to us all. And when I think about that moment in preservation, she helped preserve a nation. Just like with our giving, every single week, we're preserving a great cause in this city. We're preserving our church. We're preserving all the things that we get to do in this great city of the angels to preserve it for the purpose of Christ, for his glory in this age. And I'm so thankful that every one of you are taking this journey with us. And us as a church eldership, we're so thankful for your weekly generosity. It does not go unnoticed. God bless you, church. As you give today, we have many ways to give in the church, but for all those that give through our push pay, you simply have to text 77977 and just put in there to EN City Church. It'll take you through a series of prompts. For all those that log into our secure website and continue to give, we're so grateful. And for every single week that many of you send in checks, they continually go noticed, and we're so grateful for everyone. You don't have to be General Washington, but you can take the faith of a Deborah Sampson and you can change the destiny of a nation and help preserve it. In Jesus' name, God bless you.